Okay, tonight we're playing a cooperative game where we're working together to take down Lord Business.
So we work together to kill all the other players, and then we kill each other till one of us wins.
No, it's more of a thing where you work together and you either win together or you lose together.
Huh? Then who wins?
Everybody wins. You either win or you lose.
You're talking gibberish.
Hey guys, what's up?
Phil's talking gibberish. Make him stop.
Hell.
I was explaining to Shane how a co-op game works, where you actually have to work together to win the game.
That
That
doesn't make any sense.
sense.
How do you know who wins if everybody wins?
Right?
It'd be like in Settlers if everybody only won if everybody got to 10 at the same time.
That's
That's
not
not
how
how
that
that
works.
works.
Phil, you have been defeated. Remove yourself from the sketch immediately, sir. Work together as gamers. Gibberish. My nemesis. We meet again.
Indeed. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unqualified Experts. I'm your host, Braden Gardner,
Your corrupt overlord, Shane Dayton.
and today we wanted to take a little time to explore an area of the board game cabinet that,
Is Dusty?
yeah, Dusty's a good word for it. I was going to go with neglected, but Dusty's the nicer way to put it. And that's going to be discussing some of our favorite co-op board games. Games that don't really get as much love as some of the more competitive ones at our table, but do still have a very wide audience and can be a lot of fun to play if you can get past the concept of working together. Now, for this discussion, I do want to preface that Shane and I are each picking 3 board games, and we do consider board games that have a major cooperative emphasis with the possibility of traitor mechanics to be cooperative board games. So there are going to be some entries in here that do have a bit of conflict mixed in.
And we'll point out how they work as each one comes up, because one of the interesting things about traitor mechanics is games often handle them very, very differently. And you still have the rest of the table trying not to get murdered by the revealed traitor, so it still works.
Exactly. So I'm going to start my first pick off with a game that is cooperative in nature, but unlike most cooperative board games where you're going to have lengthy turns and a lot of collaboration with the table, you just don't have time for that, and that's 5 Minute Dungeon.
Great pick.
Now, we got exposed to this by Callahan bringing it for a game night pre-pandemic, so in the before times.
Yes.
And the premise behind 5 Minute Dungeon is very simple. Each of you is playing a character based on a typical fantasy class, and you are working to get through a dungeon as quickly as possible within a 5-minute time frame. Now, you have a wide variety of characters to choose from. There are 6 characters that you have, and each of them are double-sided, so you have up to 12 different choices. So plenty of variety there. And the way that you go through the dungeon in that game is you're working to pool symbols on cards together to overcome the challenges on a dungeon card. And at the end of the dungeon, aka the bottom of the deck, there will be a boss that you have to work together to defeat.
and everyone uses their hands together. For one enemy, you may need a barbarian with 4 shields just to power through. For a trap, you may want a rogue with 4 daggers. For the boss, it may say, hey, you better have a ranger because it has 5 arrows. Remember that time we didn't have a ranger for that boss?
Oh, that was
We
unfortunate.
didn't win.
Yeah. Each class has their own strengths and weaknesses, and they also have special abilities that can be extremely beneficial. One of the most valuable ones of which can be found in the Paladin's deck or the Wizard's ability to stop time. So you actually can take a breather from the frantic gathering of cards to discuss strategy and kind of see where everybody is. But the moment a card is played, time resumes. So you want to make sure that someone at the table isn't overzealous, or you're going to end up in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Well, this is good practice anyway, because if you overcommit resources that aren't needed for a dungeon card, there are no take-backsies.
Yep.
Once they're gone, they're gone. And if you run out of cards in your deck, your ability to help in the dungeon ends along with it, which is really unfortunate if you have 1 or 2 people doing the bulk of the work, because you want to have as many people up and functional for that boss fight as possible. But 5-Minute Dungeon's unique feature, in addition to the timer, and they actually have a sweet app that I highly recommend you download. You can actually have the voice of Krillin from Dragon Ball Z Abridged
That was amazing.
panicking as you work down the clock. There are no turns in this game. It's all collaborative, so you're focused and involved from the moment you enter that dungeon to the moment you either finish or your 5 minutes are up. Ton of fun, highly recommend. Yeah. Very fast-paced, easily the most fast-paced game we're going to discuss today. And there are a number of different variations of this game that are out there at this point. I highly recommend giving them a look if you're looking for something fast and cooperative without necessarily as much cutthroat competitive as some of the other entries we'll discuss.
It can also be a really great family night game, just because it's short, it's high energy, it's high concentration. So if you find you have a hard time getting everyone together for 30 minutes without focusing off on their phones and doing other stuff, this is the type of game that just brings you in, you're centered, you're all focusing on this one thing, and it is fun. It is really well done. It's an absolute blast to play. So, good first choice.
Thank you.
So, I am going to run into one of the obvious ones here, because it is an absolute classic, but we're going to go with Betrayal at House on the Hill.
I love this game.
Which I can put in as, it is the definition of a co-op game until it isn't. And that's part of what I love about it. You start out in the house, which is going to stab you in the face at some point. But in the beginning, you're just all players. You're working to explore as much as possible. You're looking for items. You're trying to dodge negative events called omens. And at some point, someone is going to roll badly, which means one player, based on the room and the roll, is going to turn. Whether that's their imaginary dragon friend comes to life and decides he needs to eat your friends, or you're in a weird space alien thing as he's looking for specimens, or you just get, the classic, demonically possessed by an angry ghost. At some point, one of the players, and this is what I love about the mechanics, you don't know which one, becomes the enemy with superpowers, and the rest of the group has to work to either run to the exit or defeat them. And this is a really interesting mechanic, because as you are gathering items, if one player has 4 or 5 items, like, all right, this is going to be great for when the bad guy shows up. Or you're looking at, Braden with 5 items, like, oh god, if he's the bad guy, he's going to murder our face. Mm-hmm. And so it's a really cool thing, because I find it's a co-op game for gamers who generally don't find themselves liking co-op games as much. This has a little bit of everything for everyone. The mechanics keep it fresh. There were so many story modes. Since you never know who's going to get which card or which items are going to be out, it is very strongly replayable, even if you end up getting the same scenario 2 or 3 times. It can play out radically different. I remember in back-to-back games one time, we had the dragon card. And at one point, it was early in the game because someone can't roll dice. And we got murdered fast. And then I finally got to be the bad guy for the first time. And everyone had the whole house explored with 15 items, including the 2 they needed to kill the dragon. And I died fast. Same scenario, but the different situation made for 2 completely different games. And they were both entertaining. For here, it just feels like it's one where you kind of get the best of both worlds. So you get that co-op game, you're working as a team, and the mechanics are great for creating tension. You don't know when the bad guy's going to show up. You don't know when someone's going to misroll. You almost certainly will have several close calls with a roll before the actual bad guy appears. So it's a really cool multiplayer game where you're cooperating most of the game, and assuming you're not the one who gets turned, you're cooperating to try to survive after that. And it's just a really great gaming experience. I'm always pretty happy when we break that one out.
I agree. This game scratches a lot of itches. It scratches the dungeon crawling itch because the house will never be laid out the same way twice. It scratches the co-op itch. It does have a little bit of that competitive, as you're collectively nervous about whether the MVP of your team is about to be the MVP of your enemy team. And the scenarios are highly varied depending upon the omen and location that triggers it. The one complaint I do have, and it was touched on a little bit ago with Shane's example, is that the scenarios for endgame are often highly unbalanced, either in favor of the traitor or in favor of the players. There aren't terribly many that are fair and equitable challenges for both sides where you actually have a lot of strategy to exercise. And while the expansion generally does a better job, the base game absolutely does not.
Of course, the one that grabbed in the expansion did not do a good job and really murdered our faces. So
they're not all perfect. They're just better. The floor is higher.
And that's fair. But I also think with the game, it does tend to kind of work, because it's always funny seeing the one where the bad guy's in the middle of the board, and instead of defeating him, you just have to run for the front door exit, and every player's spread out through the house. So someone's going to make it, but man, it is a lot of fun watching the scrambling to get there.
That's absolutely true. Now, the next game that I'm going to talk about is a classic. It would be argued to be a staple of the co-op genre, and honestly a pioneer of it. And that game is Battlestar Galactica. Now, Battlestar Galactica came out roughly around 2008, I want to say, and regrettably, with the fact that it's tied to that specific intellectual property, it has not gotten a reprint since. So copies are very, very difficult to come by. However, I've loved the time or two I've gotten to actually play it when a copy has come across my path, because it really encapsulates the ideals of a co-op game. It's one of the earliest examples of a traitor mechanic done well, and the gameplay is right about the right amount of length, too. You have, I think it's 10 turns to complete the game, basically. Otherwise, the Cylons win. You need to make sure that you don't run out of a specific resource like food or morale or people, or the Cylons win. And you need to make sure that you don't run out of fuel or the Cylons win. It's just one of those scenarios where you're balancing a lot of different mechanics simultaneously and doing your best to make it to the end goal for that final jump to the safe place. Now, if you're the humans, that's going to require moving 8 spaces and then making the jump. And you don't want the Cylons showing up on your ship or ruining everything for you. And much like Betrayal, you may not have a traitor right away. Everyone's dealt a loyalty card from a specified deck size at the start of the game, and you could either end up as a regular shipmate, you could end up as a Cylon, or in some cases you can end up as a sympathizer. Although the sympathizer's in the second half of the game. We'll get to that. And it is possible for everyone to just get a regular loyalty card starting out. So everybody could be working together, but you don't have a way to know that, which induces a lot of paranoia. And having played games like that before, another of which we'll talk about shortly, this makes things really tense from the get-go. And then the moment you get halfway through your 8 spaces, the other loyalty cards are dealt out. And that's where you can end up, there will be at least however many traitors in most cases. There are a couple of specific crewmates that you can play who will add more cards to the loyalty deck that are not Cylon cards. So it is possible in rare circumstances you may have fewer or even no traitors, but that requires the right composition of cards and the right composition of luck to make sure they aren't dealt. Secrecy and clever play are going to be absolutely crucial for Cylons because the crewmates aren't defenseless. They can throw you in the brig. They can even vote to execute you. So you want to make sure that you are subtly steering the ship to destruction in the early phases of the game. And then if you have to reveal yourself, then you get access to what are called super crisis cards and access to all the Cylon locations, which generally speaking are bad news bears for the entirety of the crew and will easily close out a game if they're used correctly. I would say that Battlestar is the founder of the traitor genre in co-op games as the whole, and highly recommend you give it a shot if you have a chance to pick up a copy at a reasonable price. And I've seen used copies for $100 plus at this point, and while I'd love to pick one up because I think our table would absolutely love it, it's hard to find a reasonably complete game to work with anymore.
So you're saying I should have bought that one for $5 at the garage sale?
Yes, obviously.
Yeah, I haven't played that game personally, but both him and our old school patron Magclaw absolutely rave about that game, and quality people and quality board games. So
It's
sounds like we'd enjoy it.
Oh, absolutely! If we found a good copy at a good price, we'd love it.
So speaking of traitor mechanics, we're going on to one of my favorite games I've played, is Dead of Winter. A cooperative survival game in the zombie apocalypse where there may or may not be a traitor. Beautifully designed game. It's dark, it's challenging, it definitely requires serious cooperation from the table to have a chance. We have very, very experienced gamers at our table, and we have a pretty good track record as long as there's no traitor, but even then it's always been by the skin of the teeth. We've just made it. You have to balance keeping the zombies down to your base so they don't break through. You have to have enough food. You have to make sure the trash doesn't get too high so it's not disease. You have to take care of a main mission, which will vary depending on what it is. You might be hoarding food. You might be building a vehicle for escape. You might be setting the rest of the town on fire just to kill all the zombies once you have enough supplies hoarded. But you are constantly working against a series of mechanics. You lose a player, well, your overall mood goes down in the camp. If the mood goes down too far, you fall into despair, and the whole team loses. The zombies break through, people die. Your whole team loses. Every time a character dies, despair. Trash gets too high, extra zombies. So you always feel like you are sprinting to try to help with the main part of the quest, while at the same time, there is always a dozen brush fires going on in this game. You each get characters in the beginning you draw randomly. Some are extremely useful. They let you search one location twice. They are guys who can easily kill zombies or get to kill an extra zombie for free. Or you get the Mall Santa, who is utterly useless in every way and decides that brawling with a zombie with a broken beer bottle, according to his picture, is the way to go. Which, you'd like to get rid of him, but if you do and he dies, the mood goes down.
Yeah, it's kind of a Lose, lose.
Besides, what kind of monster throws out Santa during Christmas, especially during a zombie apocalypse? I mean, I would, but,
I mean, sure.
Mood.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because each player also has a secret mission that they have to do in order to win the game. And this is really interesting because it makes the traitor mechanic work so well. Because if you lose as a group, you're all dead, you all lose. But even if you win as a group, each person has an individual goal. It might be building extra barricades. It might be hoarding extra gasoline in their hand instead of contributing it. And this means that the traitor, there might not be one, because it's a random draw at the beginning of the game. But everybody is acting sneaky. So it's not always easy to tell whether a person is fulfilling their individual win condition, or is that jerk trying to burn down the compound? Which is very important to figure out. And there's a mechanic. If they are dead sure you're the traitor, they have the ability to vote you out. If they're wrong, there are severe consequences. If they're right, you still get to cause trouble in a lesser capacity out in the zombies. It's the lesser of two evil scenarios. It's a wonderful co-op game. We were consistently faced with situations where, okay, we drew a bad card, an event card. Something bad's going to happen, we have to make a decision. Do we do this and lose half our food? Or do you go the dark route with this NPC survivor and you have extra food, but you're going to lose 2 morale? And a lot of times you are doing that balance of how much more morale can we lose? How much food do we have? For the love of God, can we put off the trash one more turn, or will the zombies overrun us? And so it's a really great balancing game because every player has to talk about what their skills are, what they can do, how to use themselves effectively as a team so you don't have the awesome zombie killers taking out trash. Something any character could do. And so it's just a really great cooperative game that ratchets up the paranoia big time. And if you have a traitor, at least in our table so far, the traitors have been spectacularly effective. Including the last game where they saw it coming right when it was too late.
Yes, that.
Shane, can we have one of your 3 sniper rifles? No. When do we get to vote you out? After my turn.
Yeah, it was just one of those moments where we got played and figured it out.
At first, I hit it very well until that moment.
And I would argue that Dead of Winter is one of, if not the best spiritual successors to Battlestar Galactica. The gameplay is very similarly styled, where Battlestar Galactica, you have a crisis every turn to resolve. You have an event every turn in Dead of Winter that you need to deal with. You have a lot of resources that you have to balance simultaneously, because if any of them reaches 0, you lose. They do take out some of the mechanics that can skew matters rather heavily against the survivors, like the sympathizer mechanic from Galactica, which in the second half of the game, if a resource is at half capacity or less, the sympathizer is simply sent to the brig. If all resources are at half capacity or less, they become a traitor. I'm glad that's not in this game, because Dead of Winter is already extremely hard.
And
so
we have yet to win as a group where there's been a traitor in a group.
It's so difficult because everything is stacked so hilariously against you, and there are so few resources to work with, and you're so often riding the razor's edge of solving your various crises, where just the wrong nudge at the wrong time can blow up everything.
And the scenarios are varied. It is a very, very entertaining game. It is a long setup, it is a long playthrough. And I will say, if you're like a heavily religious family, a heavily conservative family, where you don't like the horror theme or you don't like the darker themes, pass on it. It's not going to be your thing. However, if that's not a concern for you, it's a very great game. You do want to go teenagers and above because of some of the said scenarios, because there are some mature themes. But
very much so.
It is a wonderful, wonderful game. And if you love those dark movies or have a little of that streak of sense of humor, then it's going to be your type of game.
Completely agree. Now, if you're looking for something a little more lighthearted that scratches the co-op itch, and you don't have to worry about things like traitor mechanics or maybe we shouldn't eat this guy in the cab, then a game like Dice Throne Adventures is going to be right up your alley instead. Dice Throne Adventures is the newest addition to the Dice Throne series of games. And if you've played Season 1 or Season 2 of Dice Throne, you're going to have a pretty good understanding of how it works right off the bat. Instead of playing competitively against one another with your various badass heroes, though, you're actually working together to do dungeon crawls and find treasure and explore before taking on a final boss at the end. This actually has more of a legacy style quality to it as well. So you have a variety of dungeons you can go through where you're starting off with fighting against a rebel barbarian, working your way through dungeons up until you face off against the Mad King himself. And it's great. You have the ability to find loot. You can go to shops between dungeons to upgrade your character decks with more powerful cards. It's a solid experience, and I am beyond stoked to get a chance to play this. As of recording August 2021, we haven't had a chance to get it to the table yet because we've been crazy busy and need a chance to sit down and play through a game or two before we actually put it out for a Thursday stream. But it's a ton of fun from what I've seen, and I've spent a lot of time reviewing the rulebook and watching gameplay.
And we're familiar with the games leading up to it very thorough. And it's, yeah, we're excited about that one. Now that we can all see each other in person again, it will be hitting the table soon. And every friend we talk to whose opinion we trust has just raved about how well put together the game is. So it makes a list.
Absolutely.
Alrighty. And finally, and I mean, sorry, all valid too soon arguments aside.
Really? We're going there?
I mean...
Really?
Yeah, but can there be any other board game that tops the co-op than Pandemic? And apologies, because I'm with you. I get too soon, but you can't have a co-op game list without Pandemic right up at the top. That is the definition of a game where everybody has to be on the same page working together, and you're probably still going to lose, but maybe you have a chance if you work together. And yeah, when played properly, Pandemic is a ridiculously challenging game where you are a team of medical professionals rushing across the world to try to stop multiple outbreaks from becoming full-blown world-ending pandemics. And the rules are not kind to players, and that's on easy mode. Actually, I don't think we've won a game, and that's on normal mode.
We've won once. It's not...
Right.
It was not a pretty victory. And had the game lasted so much as one more turn, we were done.
And on hard difficulty, we've had our faces murdered on turn 1 before. And it's a game where everyone has a specific skill, and it's clear the odds are stacked. Like the virus starts up here, you start down here. So you have to be very, very strategic in how you use your skills, how you move players, how you work as a team. This is one where it's not just a player kind of talking out a decision, hearing yay or nays. Every player is talking in a group, coordinating their moves together. And that is how the game is intended to be played. Because even if you have one person who, okay, South America's under control, I have a movement point. This isn't a throwaway thought. You have to discuss, well, should the pilots use their help transport them across the board where there's likely to be an outbreak, because we're going to need someone there very, very soon. Or should we try to wipe out the disease, but then if there's an outbreak here, we're screwed. And there's a lot of that consideration, because it's never completely clear what the right move is. And we've had a couple games that ended very early where we did all the right moves. The deck was unfortunately stacked in a way where it didn't matter. And that is a legitimate complaint with Pandemic. It's so stacked against you that you can strategically be perfect and still lose. On the other side, that's also what makes the game so gratifying when you've been beat by it again and again and again. But you get that perfect run where you finally just eke out that little victory at the end. And also, I have no idea why, but every single time we play, one of the diseases is super rabies and one of them is zombieism. So keep the theme going.
I mean, yeah, I would argue of the true co-op games with no traitor mechanics, this is the single hardest
Oh,
one.
yeah.
And it isn't especially close. The difficulty of the cards in the deck is stacked so ridiculously against players that it is nigh impossible in some situations to work your way out if you make so much as one mistake.
And you need to be lucky and good to win. You need both. And that can be frustrating, especially in game. Now, that being said, because you've heard us say frustrating several times, it's a fantastic game. It is a lot of fun to play. I enjoy it. Even though there are the obvious frustrations for being very difficult, it's absolutely worth a play. It's one where if we had in the board game chest here, it would be getting played more often. I think like all our friends have it, which is why we haven't picked up a copy yet. But
Pretty much.
it's a rock solid game. And you do have to be in the mood for it, but it is a great co-op experience as you're trying to figure things out and group quarterback your way to victory.
Absolutely. And like Dice Throne Adventures, there are versions of Pandemic that are styled as legacy games. So you can have a longer term campaign if you want a different experience from the one and done board game that the legacy campaign is based off of.
Which I'm kind of intrigued by, considering how hard the board game murders your face. So I'm curious to see how this becomes a long-term thing.
Right? How many times does the world have to end before humanity is just extinct?
7, apparently. More than 7. If our gameplay is any indication. More than 7.
Fascinating.
So that's our list. There are many great co-op board games out there. So if for some reason you have a group that, I don't know, gets along a little bit better than us and don't take so much pride in murdering each other's faces, that is a great selection of games to choose from, and as well as many others. But now we want to hear from you. What's your favorite co-op board game? Is there one that's just a hidden gem that you think we missed? Do you have a particularly that jerk Traitor mechanic story? We definitely want to hear those in the comments.
Absolutely.
So please support us by subscribing, and as always, good gaming.
See you next time.
If you like what you just saw, please support us by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more great gaming content.